So it's really a pleasure for me to have Amy come down today, because if this wasn't a stop on one of her book tours, I don't think I'd ever get to talk to her. It used to be that this school was one of the few places where her stature could be enhanced by being identified as my sister, but now, particularly in this room, I suspect that more people here know her than me, so maybe she should be doing the introducing. It's very depressing. So my name is Steve. I'm Amy Goodman's brother, and I'm part of the infrastructure here known as the faculty. So there are a lot of things that could be said about Amy and that have been said by others, but wouldn't be believed if I said them because we are blood relations. I would say, completely objectively, she's the best journalist in America, maybe the world, certainly the premier broadcast journalist, and I'll go on, but I could just be quoting other people on that, but you don't need me to say those things. She's won virtually every major award in journalism, and although she hasn't won, or in human rights, probably she will in the next few years. But I think what I'll give is a family perspective, which is one of both tremendous pride and terror. Why do I say terror? Well, Amy doesn't take any breaks. She doesn't go on vacation. She goes on what normal people might call terror vacations. And what she does is she visits places, often beautiful places, where people are being terrorized, and she goes there to tell the world about it. And it's that process, which is tremendously valuable for the world, is also something that sometimes terrifies those closest to her, and I'll give you a few examples. About 18 years ago, she told us she was going to the South Pacific. We said, great. But we didn't know at the time that she was going to East Timor, a former Portuguese colony now occupied by Indonesia, and she was going to report on a Portuguese mission to East Timor, which was actually canceled late in the day because of the killing of an activist. Amy was in the funeral procession for that activist when the Indonesian military advanced on the funeral procession, raising their guns. Amy has told this story many times, for those of you who are familiar to her. She and her colleague Alan Nairn came out of the crowd between the military and themselves, trying to both stop what appeared to be happening and protect themselves on the crowd, whereupon they were grabbed and badly beaten, and over 200 of the people behind them were massacred by the Indonesian military. Her reporting on that and one other journalist who survived cast a very bright light on what was the oppression going on in Indonesia, and ultimately resulted in played a big role in world attention that ultimately resulted in the freedom of that colony from Indonesia a number of years ago. Although she actually did go back several years later, during when Clinton was there, I think both to draw attention to what was going on, and also thinking that she would be safer if an American president was in the region. She was imprisoned during that time because she was on a no entry list. Our family just happened to be home for Thanksgiving and heard about this and gave us a few days of worry. She was released at the end of the mission, and you'd think that she would come home and say, sorry, Mom, for terrifying you during Thanksgiving. What did Amy do? And she was officially banned, and now doubly so, she went right back in. A few years later, she hears about Nigeria and the Niger Delta, the Ogoni people, who were being terrorized by the foreign oil companies who basically had their own private armies. Both journalists, public activists, Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was executed, and others were being killed in pursuit of profit in that region. She decided to go there and report. Extremely dangerous place. Our mother got so upset that she tried to stop her in the only way a Jewish mother can. She bought a ticket. She said she was going to buy a ticket and go with her. Amy was nice enough to delay her trip for just 6 months when she did go in without my mother, and her reporting on that drilling and killing won the You might have heard maybe about a decade ago, Amy knows all the dates, she knows the things to the second, that the chaos in Haiti during the coup, which first ousted Aristide, the country was closed down. We heard about the last flights going out. Well, if there's a last flight going out, there's always a last flight going in, and you know Amy is on that plane. And she went in to report on that coup, and then was on a small plane with Randall Robinson and Maxine Waters about a decade later, crossing the Atlantic, going to see if she could pick up Aristide, who'd been kidnapped by the Americans and deposited in the Central African Republic. They did negotiate for his release and brought him back, much to the consternation of Colin Powell and a number of other dignitaries. She's been in the West Bank trying to straddle the divide and the perspectives of both sides in very, very dangerous situations. She's the first, I believe still the only journalist to make it into the high security prison that Laurie Berenson is imprisoned in Peru, and managed to get an interview. She's never told me how she, quote, talked her way in. She's been denounced by both Newt and Clinton as disrespectful, and in the latest encounter with authority, she was arrested during the Republican convention for doing something that apparently is declared a crime in this country, which is merely asking a question to someone in authority. Her arrest, as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, the YouTube of that arrest had been viewed 846,000 times just in the past 2 weeks. It's the #1 viewed YouTube video around the time of the Republican convention, which is something. So for all this daring do, the most remarkable thing, I think, is what Amy does every day, which you can hear on the web or on Baltimore, finally, at 88.9 every morning at 8 o'clock, and once you listen to that, you'll never turn on NPR again. It's like putting on glasses, it's like, well, actually, I'm sorry, all things considered, they do carry some NPR programming in that state, sorry. So what she does in some ways isn't really very remarkable at all. It's actually very simple. She simply asks the questions that you or I would want to ask, the ones that many professional journalists seem to find impossible to ask. She says many compelling things, but maybe the most compelling thing I've ever heard her say to other journalists is simply, do your job. When she interviews, she gets amazing amount out of people by just saying things like, and your response, signature, your response. But the secret is getting the right people, the people that the policies and sometimes guns are aimed at, not the aimers. Maybe the biggest difference between Amy and other journalists is the one time you hear her truly come alive, when she's not giving a talk herself, is when she's being lied to. She doesn't allow herself to be lied to, and she knows enough about the issues to know when the lying is occurring. And that's why politicians find speaking to her very uncomfortable, because that's what they do for a living. I would call her a seeker of truth, particularly from those who don't get a chance to speak, or from those in power who rarely held to account for not speaking to the truth. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the host of Democracy Now!, which if anybody here hasn't heard, I hope you will hear starting Monday morning. And around her, let's say, here's my sister, Amy Goodman.